You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man from the 420 Studios in Alameda, California. Today we are bi-coastal, Staten Island, New York, joined by, not in longevity or not in whatever, my oldest friend. Not my oldest friend, but my oldest friend. You know what I mean, Mert? Marty Rose, yes, from Staten Island. Huh?
Many years.
Many years. We were in the second grade together. I think, if I remember correctly, we had Miss Ross, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. You got that.
All right. And she lived in your building, and she was a hottie.
Yeah.
if I remember. Yeah. And she played the piano. Yeah, she was very cool. Jackson Heights, New York is where we grew up. Originally, you weren't from Jackson Heights. I wasn't either. I was from Manhattan. You were from Brooklyn.
Yeah, correct. Right.
And your family were Dodger fans?
Yeah, well, my mother was from Brooklyn. Actually, my dad was from Manhattan. He was a Giants fan. You know?
Ah, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I got memories. I got memories of watching the 1954 World Series on those old black and white TVs with my father. Absolutely.
Wow, very, very cool. That was the year that the Giants surprised everybody. They came out of nowhere, and
Dusty
not only
Rhodes
did they
became a household name.
Absolutely, Dusty Rhodes. And Ruben Gomez, and boy, they surprised the Cleveland Indians, who beat the Yankees. First time the Yankees lost in 6 years. They were world champions 5 years in a row, from 49 to 53. In 54, they won the most games, the Yankees did, that they ever won, and yet finished second to the Cleveland Indians, who were destroyed by those Giants in the World Series. So, go figure.
Exactly.
That was the year. That's why I'm not a bettor, incidentally.
No, they did have some great pitching, Cleveland, though, right? Jeez.
Oh, wow. Everybody from Bob Lemon to Feller was even around to pitch for them in 54. So, long time ago. But the subject today is the New York Mets, and this is kind of in honor of the passing this week of Ralph Kiner, who was an original Met broadcaster and lived to be 91 years old, active until the end, had a wonderful life, was a terrific hitter in his day, and an announcer with more malaprops than Ralph Zig Tyko.
Yeah, the papers and the airwaves were full. I mean, they didn't stop for days talking about Ralph Kiner and his life and all of his the mistakes he made in speaking on the air. I mean, he had a lot of them. A lot of them.
Oh, we've talked naturally over the years, but our favorite story is that of Kiner interviewing a catcher named Clarence Choo Choo Coleman back in the original day. And I think that was his most famous interview. Can you give me your thoughts on that, your memories of that?
Well, I mean, I had a vague memory of it, but like I say, the papers were full of all this stuff, and I've been reading it all. It's just been really great. Kiner asked him, what's your wife's name and what does she do? And he goes, well, her name is Mrs. Coleman, and she likes me, bub.
Just Drew Connery had nothing to say to that. Two people who really weren't conversationalists were put in the same booth at the same time. Conner was an announcer. Bob Murphy was an announcer. He came from Boston. He had some announcing experiences. I don't think he was the best announcer in the world, but he was ours.
He was like a folksy type of guy with that Midwestern, twang.
Right.
Or was he from Oklahoma or someplace? I think he's from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But, of course,
Lindsey Nelson, the very famous, articulate, and well-spoken Lindsey Nelson, was the third person, or actually the first person in the booth. And we had the original Mets, and they were arguably the worst team on paper, and worst team with results ever.
Yeah, we were doing some renovating in the basement a little while ago, and I found some old stuff, Ralph. I mean, some from my childhood. I found, and I remember saving this, the box score from the first game they ever played.
Wow!
I got it in my hand right now. Yep.
Let's go over that lineup.
Go ahead. Do you remember any of it? You probably remember the names, but not the order.
Right. I could remember the names.
Okay.
Frank Thomas.
Center fielder was leading off.
Richie Esther.
Exactly right. The shortstop was batting second. You might have a little trouble with that one. It's
either Elio Chacon or Felix Mantilla.
Felix Mantilla. Okay.
Felix Mantilla, who was really a good utility infielder with the Braves, was one of those guys who came over. We were expecting him to really come into his own, and when they played him a lot, he just wasn't all that good. He probably played more games at third base over the course of the season than any other Met. Mm-hmm. And okay, go on with the lineup. This is fun.
All right, batting third, that all-time slugger from Brooklyn, Charlie Neal.
Charlie Neal.
Hell of a third-place hitter, The only slugger that they did have in the lineup, batting fourth, was Frank Thomas, who did.
Frank Thomas, okay. Did he play left field? I imagine.
30 home runs. Yeah, didn't he hit over 30 home runs that year?
He did. He did, and he played in a very, very good outfield when you stopped at for their past. I mean, Ashburn was tremendous in his day. Thomas had.
Yeah, they got an all-star team here. Several guys that were all-stars in their prime, no question. Because I do
remember that sitting in for Gil Hodges that day, who was due to be their regular first baseman and was really hurt. He had a terrible knee. Was
he played that
Jim?
Game.
He didn't play that game. Jim Rufus Marshall played first base.
I got the box score right here. Gil Hodges, 1 for 4.
Oh, he did play in the first game.
Yeah. He batted sixth after Gus Bell.
Gus Bell, right? Yep. Gus was a slugger with the Reds, so they were due to be much better than losing 120 games.
And a father and grandfather of major league players.
Absolutely. And another guy who just got to the Mets, and for some reason they picked a lot of guys whose careers were more over than they thought they would be. Who pitched the first game? Was it Roger Craig?
Roger Craig started, and he pitched only 3 innings, gave up 8 hits, 5 runs, all earned. He was relieved by Bob Moorhead, pitched 3 innings, 6 hits, 5 runs, 3 earned. And some guy named Moford, who I don't recall, and Clem Levine finished up. Yeah.
Yes. Clem Levine was a terrific Dodger pitcher in his day. And
right. He was the closer, right? Yeah, in Brooklyn.
Who did they start at catcher that day?
Hobie Landreth.
Hobie Landreth, right?
He hit after Don Zimmer. Zimmer followed Hodges, and then Landreth, who
another former Dodger. You know that they appeased the old New York, Brooklyn fans, especially Brooklyn fans, by drafting heavily. When they did, everybody after Landreth was. I remember Casey saying, "Well, if you don't draft, if you don't have a catcher, there's going to be a lot of pass balls." So
that's why he had to pick a catcher first. Absolutely.
Yeah, he picked Hobie, who was traded. Let's see, I'll give you one. He's traded to Baltimore early on in the season for who?
Search me. I couldn't.
Marvelous
Oh my
God!
Is that right?
Yep.
My God!
And they ended up getting rid of Zimmer very quickly, who started the season like 1 for 34. And they traded him. They traded him to Cincinnati for, speaking of bad backs, as your wife Peg has right now, a guy named Cliff Cook, who was a real good prospect.
Yes. Yep.
They got Cliff Hook for Zimmer, and he had a bad back, and great memories of those days, Mert.
Yep, and of course Stan the Man went 3 for 3 in that game.
Stan the Man Musial could not pick one player that was a classier guy who was that great than Stan Musial. In all the years of we following this sport, I've never heard anybody say a bad word about Stan Musial.
No. Absolutely.
One other question.
Yeah.
What would, over the years, did you ever, we've been Met fans all this time. I mean, they have had ups and downs, mostly downs. Have you ever seriously considered playing out your option and going to another team to root?
Well, no.
Good. That's the loyalty. See, if anybody's listening out there and they want to talk about the loyalty of a Met fan, the Met fan is a Met fan. Win, lose, draw, they're going to be Met fans. What do you see coming up for this year? Do you see them signing Stephen Drew?
You know, they're so tight with the money. They have no shortstop. They really should sign the guy. But I don't know how long he's going to hold out. I guess it's the number of years that's the problem, you know.
Right, and he wants some sort of a buyout after the first year, which would be ridiculous to give him that, because if he didn't do well, you got him. And if he does do well, he has the option of becoming a free agent again. So I don't blame him for not accepting that offer. But, you know, I think if they did sign him under the right circumstances, they're pretty close to being competitive.
Well,
they have,
you know, the pitching is good. The starting pitching, they have a lot of good young pitchers coming up, and even though they're missing Harvey this year.
Yeah, that was a tough blow. And I hope they don't rush him back, because rushing him back.
Yeah, he's talking about trying to come back by the end of the year, but I hope he doesn't. because especially if they're out of it, in which they probably will be anyway, then there's no reason, But I mean,
they probably will be anyway.
without him, they have a decent rotation. I mean, there's nobody like Harvey, but Wheeler is pretty good. He is up and coming. The guy they got from the Giants.
Right. Absolutely. Who they Beltron, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And
so they got
Beltron just signed.
Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead. No, I won't. I interrupted you.
You were saying that Beltran signed with the Yankees. Yeah, he did.
Right. See, we read each other's mind 50 years later, don't we?
but the rotation.
I always check. I always check to you, Mert, because you were the crossing guard in the 6th grade.
Couldn't let those kids get hit by cars,
Right. Not one kid ever got hit by a car under your guard, Mert. And you had the privilege of leaving class 3 or 4 minutes early every day.
There you go.
To do that, and believe me, I envied you for that, because Mr. Naitopi was our teacher, and he didn't hold our interest very well in the 6th grade, if I remember correctly.
No,
we have great
anyway.
memories.
Yeah.
You and I used to take the Q66 into Flushing when we were 10 years old on our own to go to the Flushing Y. And the best memories of my life. It was great growing up in the Heights. What do you remember about Jackson Heights that sticks out, just that makes it unique?
Well, I mean, there were so many of us. I mean, that, when we first moved there, it was a new developing area. They were still building the buildings. My building was the first one. My building,
right? Absolutely.
1A was the first building in the whole 3-block project. So, and all the people that moved in there were young families. It was so many kids. I mean,
right.
In our own grade, in our own age group, there must have been there was over 20, because when we went to that first game at Shea Stadium, do you remember that? The first game,
I do very well.
None of us went to school, and we took up the whole row. I think there was 17 of us. I think there was 17 of us.
I don't remember that, but I remember that I played hooky, and that my mom ran without permission. Most of the kids had permission to go. I didn't have permission. My mom runs in to your dad that afternoon, walking on the street, going shopping. Your dad works swing shift. I remember that very well.
Right.
And they got to meet, and your dad says to my mom, kids have a nice day for a ball game. And my mom she filed that away for a few hours until we came home. And she goes, how was school today? And I go, oh, it was great. And she wails off and smacks me across the fucking face with a great forehand. I mean, I think that's where I get my tennis skills from, or tennis ability from. And she goes, you lied, you played hooky, you went to the ball game. And I said, you got me there, Ma, I can't. And she refused to sign a note, a permission, to stay out. I had to forge a signature to get back into Newtown High School. Yeah.
That's great. But in any case, that's the one thing about the neighborhood. There were so many kids. All you had to do was go down to. We hung out in the schoolyard all the time.
Right.
Like a block from our house, and we always were playing ball. It was basketball, touch football, stick ball, whatever it was, we were playing it from
always
until it got dark. I mean, that was it. And then
right.
you hung out by the candy store at the corner, until it was
Jack and Manny's. Jack and Manny's.
Yep. So I mean, those were good times.
Okay, now I'll give you one. You and I went to a game when they played in Shea Stadium, and we took the 7. I don't think it was called the 7 then, early on.
Not.
But I may be wrong. It might have been the E train, a continuation, whatever it was. We took the train, and we were on the same train as Tracy Stallard coming in from the city. Do you happen to remember that?
It's not clear in my head.
Okay, I just remember we looked at each other. Like, that's Tracy Stallard. The same subway. He was from Ohio State, and he was a Met pitcher, and had to be 64 on.
Okay.
But yeah. Now, one other guy I want to bring up to you, and that's from the Y in those days. We got to meet Artie Stevenson.
Right.
Art Stevenson, the basketball player, who went on to Rhode Island and broke all kinds of rebounding records at Rhode Island College. He had a very nice college career. He was drafted and the last cut by a great Boston Celtic team in those days. And I remember vividly my first touch with mortality, that we could be next, when at age 40, Art Stevenson passed away. I remember reading that in the Sporting News. I was already in California, and he passed away at a very young age, and that really put it into perspective right there.
That was.
We're not guaranteed anything. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be 40 years from now. But
hey, so look, a lot of us didn't make it as far as we did, Ralph. So,
Absolutely.
We're doing all right.
Hey, Mert, these are great memories. Let's do it again. You did. You've been on once or twice before. You'll be back.
Good.
Love you, my man.
All right, Ralph. Same here.
All right.
Always a pleasure.
I'm going to sign off, but you got to listen to my sign off. My sign off is: keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your kids out of the laps of clerics wearing dresses. Very, very important. I mean, you got to do that, and keep on keeping on.
All right,
thanks,
man.
Mert. We'll talk soon.
You're welcome. Anytime.
All right. Have a great one.
Thanks. Okay. Bye now.